Hi, Jeff from Trauma Type here. Today I am joined by Elodie. She's an INTJ from France. Oflameo, he's an NTJ of some sort. Jeff from Gen X Jeff, he's an ENTP. And Zeon, the ENTJ, the mysterious mystical one, has an incorporeal form. That's why he's not on video. Today we're going to discuss neurodivergence, autism, Asperger's, ADHD, giftedness, and kind of everything that falls under that umbrella. So go ahead and like, share, subscribe. This should be streaming on Gen X Jeff's channel as well. And go ahead and feel free to ask questions. We'll get the audience questions a little bit later. So go ahead and put them in the chat. And if you're watching this later, be on the live stream, leave something in the comments and like, share, subscribe. I'd appreciate it. First, we'll go around and just do some quick introductions. Gen X Jeff, do you want to start?
Sure, I can. I'm Jeff. I'm autistic. I guess you could say ADHD. I'm neurodivergent, let's just say. I have a mix of autism, ADHD, giftedness. I was diagnosed gifted in the first grade, so that was my main experience with neurodivergence for most of my life. I'm a certified peer counselor. I have a coaching practice for neurodivergent men. And I have a YouTube channel under Gen X Jeff, Primal Hex, PRIMALHEX at YouTube, and also same name on Twitter. So I guess that's it for now.
All right, thank you. Go ahead and check out his channel. I think he does have some informative talks there. I done an interview on there last week, I think it was. And Elodie, do you want to go?
Yes. Well, I am 34 years old. I have been diagnosed twice exceptional last year in 2022. So with giftedness plus neurodevelopmental disorder, now with Asperger. And I had many jobs by the past, but now I am on YouTube. And that's all.
All right. Elodie and I did an interview a while back too. I'll go ahead and put that in the description. I haven't yet, but I will. Oflameo, I've definitely done an interview with him, and we just did his birth chart not too long ago on our other channel that Zeon and I do, Astrotype. Do you want to introduce yourself, Oflameo?
Yes. Yeah, today you may call me Hank Oflameo. I'm an autist, Pittsburgh, around 30. I move stuff around for a living. I have a narcissistic personality style. At least if we go by DSM jargon standards. Not a fan of the Psychology Academy. That's some philosophical problems, but that's neither here or there.
All right. And he also has I haven't got the link to it. I forgot where it was, but I'll link it. He has a blog called Oflameo's Doom Bunker. So be sure to check that out. I'll add that in the description. And Zeon, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Zeon, and high-functioning autistic ENTJ. I had a personality server since about 2018 for MBTI and other things. And I met Jeff on his server maybe, what was it, like a year ago, a year and a half?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. And I've been doing the Astro videos with him ever since about a year ago, maybe. So...
yeah, we have a channel called Astrotype. It's pretty new. It's definitely already linked in the description below. We're finding correlation between personality type and people's birth charts. Gen X Jeff will actually be our guest tomorrow, but I'll have to edit it out. It's not a live stream or anything, so that'll come out sometime next week, so be sure to look for that. And we'll go ahead and get into the questioning. Zeon, I guess we'll start with you. All right, so can you give an explanation of your diagnosis and your experiences with neurodivergence?
My experiences with neurodivergence. I only got diagnosed about 4 years ago. And I only found it because I was actually temporarily between jobs, and I was off just kind of doing my own thing and stumbled across some information about it. Now, people around me and I had always thought that I was at least ADHD. We didn't necessarily know if it was autism or anything. And we concluded that it wasn't several times. So I finally decided to go and get tested. And then it turned out that, we were seeing the pattern that I was. And part of what really helped determine that I was autistic was kind of the early life experiences that I had and talking about how I had delayed, speech development and how I'd always used really large words when I was younger and things like that. I was always off by myself. I was always very isolating, even though I'm extroverted, which is strange, right?
Yeah, so something I have about ADHD. So my son has it, and he definitely isn't the intellectual type. He struggles with any kind of schoolwork or anything academic or anything in general. So how does ADHD manifest with giftedness?
Well, I don't know. How does it?
I don't know. Okay.
I can maybe touch on that when it
Yeah.
comes to
All right, go ahead and we'll go on to you, Jeff.
what is the question?
So what's your explanation of your diagnosis and your experiences with neurodivergence?
Well, when I was growing up in the 70s, they weren't really focusing on autism, ADHD. Those categories hadn't really been fully formulated, I don't think. So I got diagnosed as giftedness. I was reading at a very advanced level. It was obvious. The teachers referred me to testing. I got put in various gifted programs, went to a residential school for the gifted as a teenager. And so I know it as giftedness, but I used to teach as an adult. I taught special ed, and I've worked with the autism ADHD population for years in my work as a peer counselor. And I notice a lot of the same features of giftedness in ADHD and autism. And there's a chart online that shows the 3 circles of the Venn diagram and the traits that overlap. Stuff like hyperfocus or monotropism in the case of autism, which is the attention tunnel, intense emotions, attention to detail, that type of stuff can all be features of. So I think our brains are just different, and whether it gets categorized as giftedness, autism, ADHD, whatever, I don't think the clinical picture has quite caught up to the reality of neurodivergence. A lot of the ADHD people I know and a lot of the kids I taught that were special ed and classified as ADHD looked to me a lot like giftedness. Like I almost couldn't tell them apart. They were highly intelligent. It just didn't take the traditional form that the mainstream teachers were used to identifying as intelligence. And then a lot of adult gifted people I work with also have ADHD or autism, or 2E, exceptional, we call it, which is technically what I am. And it's the same thing. You see those common features in both categories. So we talk about it all the time, what the exact link is or what the overlap is. I don't think anybody has it figured out. But I think if you're neurodivergent, you could potentially have traits of any of the 3 main categories that currently get talked about as neurodivergence.
All right, very cool. Flamo, do you want to go? And you said something about having to go to work.
No, I don't go to work today, Jeff.
Okay, you
No,
said
that was about backstage stuff, so you can ignore that. So, yes. So, I was diagnosed as Asperger syndrome twice, once when I was a child and once when I was an adult. I was nagged by school, and they never thought I was gifted. They didn't think I was going to get out. But I started to ignore them because they were just kind of dumb, and my grades went up. The harder the classes, the less I could get help, the better my grades were. Ironic. But
that is. Yeah, I forgot. Oh, go ahead.
You go.
I was just gonna say I read somewhere, I watched a video where they talk about giftedness where you really don't need help in younger grades, but as you get older, you don't learn how to study, and when things get more complicated, then you kind of have struggles. But that's kind of off topic. I don't know.
I guess it's on topic, but I guess it's the opposite. I figure out how to study some things, so I can get stuff done that's just considered hard that other people can't do. But that's not useful unless you already know the easy stuff. But maybe with this chatting PC stuff, all the easy stuff be done automatically, and I don't have to worry about it. Then that'll be relevant again.
All right, very cool. Elodie, do you want to give your explanation of your diagnosis and your experience?
I discovered the MBTI recently, 2 years ago. And after I discovered I was INTJ, I meet a person during an interview, and she told me maybe I have giftedness, So I think a lot. One day I researched all the information on internet and I decided to meet a psychologist. And for the test about the giftedness, the test was in many parts. The first part was about pattern recognition. The psychologist sent me a series of 4x2, and I had to set the ID in common between these two words. Another part was about the short-term memory. I had to repeat the number she said in the same order or upside down, or sort from the smallest to the largest, or vice versa. And she increased the difficulty. And I was really surprised that I could remember 12 numbers because I thought everyone could remember 7 numbers. Another part was about age calculation with a problem to solve. Another was about the ability to reproduce a given picture by using the cube. It was time and it made me stressed to notice. Uh, Another part was about the ability to unfold a shape in the head. She showed me the image of a folded strip. I had to imagine a processing, and I had to imagine the same shape, but unfold and choose the right answer among 6 proposed. But at the end, my information processing speed dropped. I was unable to think and process more information. That's why she mentioned on the report twice exceptional and therefore giftedness with a neurodevelopmental disorder. She also asked me some questions about childhood and life. She told me I had trauma, and when I said her that I have always been super calm, she responded, yes, but inside it's boiling. And for the diagnosis of Asperger, it was during 5 or 6 sessions. He let me talk and he asked me some questions about life experiences with other childhood, behavior, life, and memories. It was enough easy to answer because Asperger, we have a filmographic memory and we remember a lot of detail with precision. And he also asked me to write 4 pages about sensory sensitivity, the routines, the behavior, the specific interest, the personality, my way of thinking and functioning. And before and after the diagnostic, so for 1 year until, until now, I think the conscious work a lot and doesn't really know if I have to integrate, accept this part of the personality, which are still partly in the unconscious, to bring to the surface. Sometimes the sleep was disturbed. And that's all.
Okay, very cool. I was going to answer your question, Ozian, if that's how you say your name, but Oflameo did in the chat. For those joining us, go ahead and put your questions in the chat, and we'll get to them eventually. All right.
He likes to pronounce it Ozian. Ozian.
Ozian, sorry. Thank you for joining us, by the way. Oflameo, we'll start with you on this question. What do you think autism neurodivergence is in your own words?
So, neurodivergence is just a rebranding the term mental illness. So, in this context, they want to label it as a non-insult, but with pretty much all the psychology labels, over time they become insults because that's what they mean. That's what they mean, and everyone picks up on it eventually. But it's not nice, so they have to rebrand like every decade or so just to run away from the negative incarnation.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, I don't really get the whole DSM-5 where they put out an edition every 10 to 15 years and go by that and don't deviate from it. Kind of doesn't really make any sense because things change. Elodie, do you want to give your definition of autism neurodivergence?
Yes. Yes. It's a neurodevelopmental condition. Our brain functions differently than the majority. We have another way of being in the world, of perceiving the thing, of deciding, another way of processing information, of thinking, and of interacting with the world and people, just another functioning. And for me, we have the sixth sense more developed. It's sort of like we receive twice more information, or like if we don't filter the information, we have a real sensitivity to the world. Everything is amplified or intensified. The light, the sound, the feeling, the dream, practically everything. We may have a difficulty in executive functioning, interaction, planning, organization, multitasking, restrictive interest, behavior, routine, difficulty with transition, difficulty also to express emotion. The mind and brain are faster than the body. We constantly think. We may feel constantly tired, with nervous and mental fatigue, and sometimes chronic fatigue, pain in the back, feet, arm. And also, like I said before, for Asperger, filmographic memory, very realistic dream, attention to detail. We notice the thing other don't. Detail are perceived before the wall. We are naturally sometimes anxious and prone to depression, frustration. We also can take things literally. We have a strong sense of justice and loyalty, and we may be very creative and have a natural gift for music or another art. Uh, to sum up, we are a really authentic living being without a filter. And for me, the neurotypical and neurodivergent are just two variations of the human species, exactly like the different variation in animal and plant. It's a layer. It's really a layer of our personality, of our functioning.
Okay, very cool. Thank you. Jeff, do you want to give your definition of autism neurodivergence?
I would say it's a genetic variation. It's a natural genetic variation that occurs in humans, and I think it's neurodevelopmental and it happens in the womb. So we come out that way. It's not something you acquire as out once you're after birth. Um, and neurodivergence is referenced against the norm or the typical. So we're not neurodivergent to ourselves. I'm completely normal from my own self. I'm just divergent when you compare me or reference me against somebody who is more typical, statistically typical in their traits and processing and such. So that's what I'd say. It's just a natural variation in processing or cognition or perception. Everything that combines to make up how we take in and piece together and interpret the world. And then there's also some psychomotor traits sometimes, like stimming and rocking. So it's not just the brain; it's the entire nervous system.
All right, very well put. Zeon, do you have a definition of neurodivergence and autism?
Yeah, no, basically what Jeff was saying is pretty much spot on. I would also add that sometimes neurodivergence comes from environmental factors like heavy metals, toxins, chemicals, poison, even sometimes like the psychological, the social, the family environment. It's mostly a genetic thing, but you can get symptoms and behaviors that look neurodivergent based on other factors. So it's really hard sometimes to disentangle all of them. And also things like autism can be made a lot worse if you have various inputs like heavy metals and stuff like that in the environment.
Yeah, I know we were talking about like the heavy metals found in baby formula,
Yeah.
and Tylenol. Women taking Tylenol when they're pregnant for like ADHD and autism. I was looking at that with my son. All right, Elodie, I guess you can go first on this one. Do you think there's a reason or purpose for people being neurodivergent?
I think yes. I note maybe we are able to raise the consciousness, the awareness of people, to make them understand that we are all different and unique. We all have talent and weaknesses that we have to use to help each other. and not to criticize others for their differences. We are here to help improve the world and people to make life easier and more enjoyable for everyone. With music, art, uh, we notice and solve the problem others don't notice, which is really useful and simplify the thing. Maybe you teach others what really life is, what is really important. We help people to accept and respect themselves and everyone as they are with their strengths and weaknesses, love themselves and others with their uniqueness. And we, we, by breaking them or teaching the spiritual or metaphysical knowledge, such as MBTI, typology, psychology, astrology, human design, all the system to know ourselves, to help people to live their best life, be in harmony. Maybe we are here to teach people what really is listening, kindness, compassion, understanding, and respect, acceptation, justice, and honesty. This is what I think.
All right. Thank you for sharing that. Oflameo, we'll go with you. Do you think there's a reason or purpose for people being neurodivergent?
Yes, the reason for people being neurodivergent is because a group of people create a magic label for people to collect their insurance money. So it's got similar to people creating a label hippie to collect police money, or people making a label witch to collect religious donation money. It's just like that.
Okay. Okay. Interesting take. Jeff, do you have a reason for people being born neurodivergent or a purpose for it?
Do I have a reason? I see it as natural. It's just a natural given. I don't know that nature has any particular purpose or intelligence to it. It may be just a evolutionary adaptation or a random mutation. I think purpose is a human concept to begin with, and it has whatever purpose we give it as humans or as society. And I imagine that would vary from culture to culture and historical period or context to historical period. So I don't think it has any kind of intrinsic purpose on its own other than being a natural variation, but wouldn't call that a purpose. But it can give individuals purpose in their life, like individual neurodivergent people. Society may construct some kind of purpose for it in different contexts and settings. So I don't think on its own it has any particular purpose other than what we give it or do with it as a collective, as a community.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Angry Peach. Nice to see you. And Zeon, do you think there's a purpose for it or a reason that people are born this way?
Well, define purpose.
I mean, like in astrology, everything happens for a reason, right? We're all born to be the people that we're meant to be.
It's sort of. I mean, not even in astrology, because it's kind of like Jeff just said. Is there a purpose? Is there an inherent purpose in nature? Like, what kind of purpose do you mean?
I mean, like, do you think there's a life goal that people with neurodivergence? Do you think there's a specific thing they serve in society? Is it like evolutionary? Like, are we evolving this way? Just kind of your own thoughts.
Well, Jeff, even evolution might not have a purpose. Are we talking about a divine purpose? Are we talking about practical purposes we want to use it for? Or
I guess whatever is your personal belief.
well, yeah, I mean, it can have a purpose. Jeff pretty much said it, but it's like, yeah, evolutionarily speaking, it could eventually be sort of its own biological aim within the human species. You know, this is kind of how evolution works over time. And obviously, in a more immediate sense, we can have a purpose with neurodivergence, trying to find specific slots to fit into where we are really good at something, or we just have a very different perspective than other people. It's usually hard, obviously, right, for autistics to find jobs and groups to fit into, but there is a purpose. Yes, you can define one. You can find it for yourself. Biologically, there's a purpose because autistics tend to be truth tellers more than the general population. They tend to be people who don't care about social conventions and don't listen to what we might call political brainwashing. So that's pretty useful.
All right. Thank you. All right, we'll start with you, Zeon. Are you considered gifted or 2E? And what does that mean exactly?
What's 2E?
Twice exceptional.
Yes, I definitely am. No, when I was younger, I was actually in gifted and talented programs, and I actually got burned out on them and started failing them on purpose so I could get out of them. But I was considered gifted, and I guess I still am. It's kind of a weird designation now, right? As an adult, it was that kind of thing that you mentioned before. I don't know. Was I the one that sent you the video on this, where they're talking about how gifted kids tend to kind of like have a hard time later in life because they don't learn how to do a lot of stuff? And I kind of had a little bit of trouble with that. I mean, I still got my college degree. I still got through everything, but
Yeah, maybe it was. It was I think a healthy gamer video I watched just like a
Yeah.
week or two ago.
yeah, that's the one.
Okay. All right, Jeff. I think you're the kind of the expert here on this. You're considered gifted 2E. You already mentioned that. What does it mean exactly to be gifted or twice exceptional?
Well, twice exceptional is a very specific technical term in the United States educational system, and exception means exception from the norm, and it's used to indicate what services you get when you're in the mainstream public school system. So if you receive special ed services for any type of, it can be ADHD, autism, learning disability, whatever, that's one exception from the norm. And then if you're identified gifted, that's a second exception from the norm. So that's where the term 2E originated. Now, broadly applied, even in the adult world, it just means giftedness plus some other form of neurodivergence or disability, learning disability. It could be dyslexia, dysgraphia, ADHD, autism. There's debates whether mental illness like bipolar or PTSD also qualifies as an exception. So basically, it's gift. You have gifted people without any kind of exception that are just gifted but otherwise neurotypical, and then you have the twice exceptional, which is giftedness plus some type of neurodivergence, and it has added features to the giftedness, or it alters the way the giftedness presents or manifests.
Okay, thank you. I'm still learning all this stuff, and I'm just clearing it up in my head too. And I'm kind of debating like how much this applies to me personally. And thank you, Mark, for joining us. I appreciate it. I think ADHD is lumped in all that as well. Oflameo, do you want to go ahead and are you gifted or 2E? You said you were, right, in
Negative.
school?
Negative. I was not considered gifted. I guess it could be considered 2E, but they weren't using the term at the time. So gifted or 2E means the state wants to segregate you from the other students. Gifted to accelerate you, and I guess 2E is just to petition you, so you don't kind of get in the other students' way, I guess. But yeah, it's just the education segregation programs makes the school easier to manage.
Okay, very cool. Mark says they don't think they have this in Australia, and he was found to be on a spectrum about 40. Okay, yeah, it's kind of like the boat I'm in right now. I'm not 100% sure if I am or not, and I'm 38. Elodie, I think you said you're 2E, right, in giftedness. Do you want to
Yes.
explain?
By the same definition as all the other person said, me, I'm considered as twice exceptional. It means the same giftedness with another neurological condition or trouble or disorder. In my case, it's Asperger, but every gifted person is very different and unique, and it can be with autism, ADHD, or another trouble like dyslexia, for example, or mental health issue like anxiety, depression, and for I'm considered twice exceptional. In short, the giftedness means IQ above 130, a great pattern recognition for image, sound, an ability to deconstruct the thing in our mind to visualize, it can be a good short-term memory, higher memory capacity, possibly, knowledge in various fields and knowledge, general culture. And in the giftedness, there is also the hypersensitivity, hyper-empathetic, and in my case, I don't know if it's the case of the other person who are gifted, there is the imposter syndrome. And a lot of ideas who pop in our mind. It also named multi-potential in French. And as I said before, every gifted person is unique and have his own multi-potential and talent.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I know her accent could be a little thick. I do appreciate her coming on here and telling her story and her side of things. I believe you have it written down, right, Elodie? I could put the subtitles in later. Okay, well, I'll get that from you later. Jeff, what are the advantages and disadvantages of being neurodivergent?
Okay, before I answer that, I want to mention that I do have a Discord server for 2E adults. So if you think you're 2E or you want to connect with other twice exceptional people, you can contact me. That's a good way to kind of find out if you're neurodivergent or 2E2 is by hanging around other people that have the same traits. So the question was what is it, the good or bad things about being neurodivergent?
Yeah, the advantages, disadvantages.
It's hard to say the advantages because I only know my neurodivergence. So it's when I compare it to others that I kind of see some of the advantages or disadvantages. But just me sitting alone in my room, it's hard to tell what's advantageous about it. I think the giftedness it gives us a higher intelligence. We learn faster, takes less repetitions. I pick up on things very easily. I have a drive and energy where I can actualize and get things done. And I have divergent thinking, which is being able to think outside the box, and I also have convergent thinking, which allows me to focus the thinking on a goal and bring it to fruition. So I'm not going to break it down into specific. I'll just call it all neurodivergence. I have a focus. I'm able to focus on 5 or 6 things at once, and I'm pretty much in control of my attention span, so I can shift it at will to whatever I want to focus on. And I'm usually at my best when I'm doing 5 or 6 things at once instead of trying to focus on one thing. So it has productivity advantages. It has processing advantages. I think the disadvantages is you're weird, you're a misfit. It has social disadvantages. You can't just smoothly integrate into just any group like I guess a lot of neurotypical people can. I have to very carefully pick and choose what settings I think I'm going to be successful in or be an asset to instead of a liability. And there's a lot of social confusion because you can't always, or I can't always figure out where I fit socially or what the social dynamics are around me. So I'm kind of just bumbling around blindly trying to navigate the social world. So I'd say it has disadvantages in that area. And I'm also dyspraxic, which is it's a processing disorder, but it affects the motor coordination and fine motor skills. So I'm very clumsy. I'm constantly dropping things, bumping into things, and that's annoying and irritating. So I would call that a disadvantage as well.
All right, very cool. Flamo, do you want to give any advantages, disadvantages that you find?
Oh, absolutely. So one of the main advantages is the outside cultural perspective. So people tend to think one way and get into a groove, but a lot of times that isn't you lose you don't have an optimal process. So I can look at the thing with fresh set of eyes and say, oh, well, why does this do this? Why do you do it that way? And I can change things around a little bit and make things run much smoother. But on the other hand, I'm not part of the majority culture, so it's hard for me to sort myself into the place in the hierarchy. So generally, what I do is just ignore that hierarchy. I just treat it as irrelevant for most purposes. I just still do like an agent based stuff. Like this guy has a bit to do that. That guy has a bit to do that. I'll follow that. But rank authority, I kind of don't care because it doesn't make a difference most of the time. But on the yeah.
All right.
I don't think I
Thank.
think that's bad.
Okay. Very cool. Thank you. Elodie, do you want to give advantages and disadvantages that you find in your life?
Yes, for the advantage, I think we know the high intuition, creativity. The maybe that after I know every neurodivergent person is really different. There are certain of us can have a talent for drawing or music. The hypersensitivity for the good and the bad, both emotional and sensory. We receive better or more the information, like we may see better, we hear better. We may hear frequency and vibration that others don't. Sometimes I can hear the floor and the wall vibrate, the vibration like the animal does. Our perception is sharper. For the good and the bad, hyper empathetic, more compassion. As I said before, the strong sense of justice, honesty, authenticity. We are not judgmental, more open-minded. We can be self-taught. Also, the perfectionism is great and also a curse. I have a lot of things, but I think we say everything we need. Maybe for the disadvantage, but maybe I can go to this later. As I said before, for the advantage, we see or notice the detail the other miss, the problem others don't see. We find solutions that others often don't have or never thought of. We can bring a better and simpler solution, which take less time, less energy, and less money, which is good for the company. Uh, and maybe for the disadvantage, sometimes for my case, I I notice certain people reject us unconsciously because we function, think, and learn differently than them. And that also the way of the society works and is built is not often suitable for neurodivergent. And many of us, I think around 40% of neurodivergent have difficulty to find a job, and most of us are unemployed. We can, for example, for Asperger, we can have issue during the interview, whereas we have all the competence, skill, and capacity to have the job. It's just sometimes we fail the interview. Well, that's all.
All right. Thank you, Elodie. Zeon, do you want to give any advantages and disadvantages of neurodivergence?
Well, I mean, yeah, obviously there's a lot of different kinds of neurodivergence, so there's a lot of different kinds of advantages and disadvantages. Even within like autism, you'll see all kinds of different behavior and strengths and weaknesses. Usually like strengths and weaknesses kind of come together, and like not always, but usually your greatest strength is your greatest weakness kind of thing. And what Flame was talking about is something that I would relate to pretty heavily, which is you're on the outside of society and you don't think like everyone else, which means you can see what's going on more clearly. Usually, you have the ability to kind of disassemble it and analyze it from a more sort of clarified perspective. For me, one of the big advantages of the autism is the intense focus that I do everything with. And it can be an advantage, it can be a disadvantage, because it's like I drive so hard at things with so much zeal that when it fails, it's like it's the end of the world for me, and it feels like everything just exploded in my face. But it also drives me really hard to accomplish things, and when I do actually succeed, it feels really amazing. And that intense focus has been necessary for me to accomplish a lot of what I actually have done. So
Yeah, I can definitely resonate with that a lot. All right, Oflameo, I'm definitely interested in your opinions on this. What are your opinions on the DSM-5 WHO criterion for neurodivergence as disorders?
So I think the DSM-5 is a magic book designed by committee. there's an explicit diagnostic section for large religions in DSM-5 to prevent the psychology category from getting in conflict. So on page 14 of the 2013 edition of DSM, it spells out all kinds of exceptions to a DSM diagnosis. So, like if it's a religion that's big enough, it's big enough to be considered culture. No matter how strange the behavior is, they'll ignore it as a diagnosis because there'll be political issues. So, for example, homosexuality used to be a mental illness in an older version of the DSM. I think it was 3, but it got removed because of protest. And they didn't explicitly say why it was removed. They never made a comment about a change law to why remove something. But if you just go look at anthropological record, it was because of politics. So unlike any other medical condition, anything in DSM can go away because of politics. It can appear and disappear by politics. So mental illnesses is a social construction. It's not a brain thing directly, except that social movements are encoded in the brain and probably the rest of your body, but it's not a thing in itself.
All right, thank you. Ozian, we'll get to your, if I'm saying your name right, I'm probably butchering it again. We'll get to your question here in a minute after we finish this one. Elodie, how do you agree with the DSM-5 WHO criterion? I'm sure you go with WHO since you're not in the US.
Yes, enough, yes. On my side, I find the criteria for Asperger were very accurate and describe very well most of my personality and functioning. But the diagnosis should be reconsidered because a lot of people are misdiagnosed. They shouldn't ignore that most of the time we may have 2 or more conditions and take it in consideration because many conditions have the same trait and can be confused and overlap. Also, due to this overlap, trait or characteristic can be accentuated or diminished due to this overlap. For example, in my case, I got 90% for the Asperger diagnosis and a little less of 50% for the diagnosis autism for girls. And if I only had the diagnosis for autism, I would never have been validated. I think they should consider that in our mind, we may not consider ourselves as a girl or boy, but as a living being. Perhaps they should also pass off the boy's diagnosis for the girls and the girl's diagnosis for the boy, being more flexible. Don't set the bar that high because we have many conditions which overlap. I found the diagnostic question for Asperger excellent. The diagnostic was longer, more detailed and precise, which was not very the case for the autism diagnosis. I think maybe they should review the Asperger diagnosis both for autism level 1, 2, and 3. And one last thing, yeah, I noticed there was on internet a lot of people who think they are just hypersensitive. And personally, I think the people are more than that. The hypersensitivity for me doesn't come from nowhere and doesn't come lonely. For me, it necessarily come from being neurodivergent.
All right, thank you, Elodie, and your accent is fine. You could even speak in French if you want to. I read by 2050 that French might be the dominant language in the world because of the population growth in Africa. So there's an audience there for it. Zeon, what do you think of the opinions of the DSM-5 and WHO?
The DSM-5 is, I guess it's okay as far as it goes. Like, it has some really strange designations because we're talking about, the social sciences for the most part and trying to quantify things scientifically in places where maybe that's not always an easy thing to do. So I'm not sure about the way that the definitions have changed over the years because it seems like there's not necessarily always rhyme or reason as to how they change between the different versions. and I've seen quite a few DSM criteria that didn't seem to be, or like I've seen things that have been missing from it. So I think it was ADHD, like in the DSM-5, does not have a designation for emotional hypersensitivity or rejection sensitivity, which seems to be a really big part of a lot of people's ADHD. So I don't know. There's like some weird blind spots. I think that the emotional sensitivity for ADHD used to be in the DSM, and then they took it out for some reason because they couldn't easily quantify it. So it's weird how they're not always focused on maybe more the qualifiable part of the diagnosis, only the quantifiable part.
Yeah, not everything can be replicated in a lab. They're solved by a math equation in life, and SJs kind of tend to think that way. And I think they kind of ruin psychology because psychology is kind of supposed to be like this abstract thing, you know. It's not like everything you just measure.
Yeah, if they just kept it to narratives, it probably be useful enough. Then you could just use tropes, but most people can't figure that out. So it's bad. You can't get insurance money via your narrative. It doesn't work. So they had to count check boxes instead.
All right, Jeff, do you want to touch on this real quick? Then we'll go to a question from one of the audience members.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the DSM. I think it's an insurance coding manual. I don't think the clinical... It's put together by panels of psychologists, so it's just whoever's opinion gets heard the loudest when they're coming, because there were a lot of dissenting opinions about folding the diagnoses of autism onto ASD.
Oh, yeah.
So it's consensus based. It's not research or science based. And I think autism research, the clinical picture, like I said, is very far behind the reality. There's a young autistic researcher, Patrick Dwyer, who put out a wonderful paper on the neurodiversity paradigm and the directions that he thinks research should go in and the paradigms that could be more fruitful for neurodivergence research. So I think when the clinicians catch up to that and start going in the direction that he's recommending, we'll see a more accurate clinical picture. So right now I don't take the DSM seriously about much.
Yeah, I definitely agree with it just being like an insurance way to like bill pretty much. I was a case manager for kids with behavioral health issues, and my supervisor was like, hey, this kid isn't diagnosed. Can you diagnose him? Like, I don't even have like a bachelor's degree or anything. I didn't really feel comfortable with that. And she just read through it. Oh, look, this kid's ADHD just because of like the intake interview that he did. I'm going to diagnose him ADHD so we can bill it. And, you know, that's kind of ridiculous. I think I got everyone in this question. We'll go ahead and Zeon, I believe I'm saying that right. Correct me if I'm wrong, Oflameo. The question for the panel: people like my son have a learning disability and wouldn't feel comfortable on these panels. What do you say advocacy for neurodivergents who don't have a voice? Then he goes on to say, do you have advocacy of those without a voice is my question. We'll start with, I forgot who I left off with. I think Jeff is going to start this time. Yeah, because I left last with him. All right.
There are, depending on where you live, that you can check your local resources. There are organizations that do advocacy. I don't know them at the top of my head. So there's probably some for ADHD, some for autism, some for whatever his specific needs are. If you're working with the school system, I talk about this on my own channel. It helps to identify the people that are part of the school system. It may not be your direct teacher. It may be a teacher that works with your son, or it may be an assistant principal or a guidance counselor, but try to identify the people that do recognize the same needs for your child that you do, and kind of build a little advocacy network within whatever system you're advocating within, and enlist as many allies as you can and have them help you do the advocacy as well. And advocacy never stops with just one person. If you're not getting your needs met with one person, there's always somebody else you can talk to. It's a network, it's an ecosystem, so you can always go over someone's head or go to somebody else. So don't get too frustrated if you don't get find a solution with like one particular person. There's kind of an art and skill to advocacy, and these organizations that I'm talking about can usually help you or point you in the right direction. You can always contact me if you have specific advocacy questions as well.
His contact information will be down below in the description, so go ahead and contact him if you feel so inclined. Oflameo, same question for you.
So I don't feel comfortable on these panels, but the thing is, it doesn't matter. I got on here anyways. So there's a lot of ways to get around that communication, like pre-scripting your stuff. If you have a hard time writing, you can draw. I still draw a lot of diagrams. So you have to find a way you can communicate anyway, just so you get some leverage. Because you can use the advocacy groups, but you're playing telephone. It's gonna dilute your communication. I try using this to dilute your communication an extreme amount, and you'll barely get anything done. So to get leverage, you need to find some leverage, communicate any way you possibly can. It doesn't have to be writing, doesn't have to be talking. It could be drawing. It could be reorganizing things that already exist. It could be link farming, but you have to find your own. You have to find your own voice somehow, so you can communicate.
All right, thank you. And Elodie, do you have an answer to this question?
No, I think I'm not the best to answer to this question.
Okay, thank you. Zeon, do you have anything to add?
Only that when you're autistic, if you become an adult, it seems like all the support gets cut off. So if you're asking, like, is your son, I don't know how old his son is or what kind of, what his son has, if he has autism or ADHD or what it is. But once people are adults, it seems like they just get completely cut off and just like thrown out into the wild. So I don't know if there always is that much help for them. Maybe just try to get them to adjust as much as you can now before, that hits them.
Okay. They have another question asked too. I read somewhere that he lives along the Nile, or she. It could have just been a joke. I can't really tell. So it could vary by country and place, of course, too. But since we're on the topic, Zion has another question. People like my son obviously fell into autism with delayed onset speech and learning disability. DSM may have issues, but does it identify my son to get help? I think, like Zeon was saying, if you're a kid here in the United States, you can definitely get like ABA therapy, which is applied behavioral analysis. They kind of teach you like social skills. Jeff's shaking his head. We'll get to him in a little bit. But yeah, there's programs and stuff to help. Zeon, we'll start with you. Do you want to touch on that?
Let's see. Okay, so like, what is the question here?
I know the answer.
Like how do you get help with the DSM-5 diagnosis of autism? I think is pretty much what.
So in my experience, and I've seen quite a few people have to go through the ringer trying to get diagnosed. It's like you really want to have other people around you who know a lot about your behavior and can write down specific aspects of your behavior to give as testimony to it sounds really strange, testimony to like the therapist or the person who's doing the testing, so that they can see that from an outside perspective, you have all these different things going on that qualify as being autistic, I had several people talk about, like my mom had to talk about how when I was a kid, I would slide off of her lap. Like I was just a toddler and I'd always run away from her. I didn't want to be touched. I didn't want to be around her. She couldn't really talk to me closely face to face. I would just always run away. Things like that. Or like close friends who know me will talk about how even though I seem really well adjusted, I have all these other behaviors that are kind of socially abnormal. And I don't always engage people the way that they expect me to. So then people get really surprised because I seem normal and then I'm really not normal. I don't give the reactions that they want me to. So like they all have to write this down, and then you can bring that to the therapist or whoever's making the diagnosis, and they can see, okay, this is a consistent thing. This falls in line with autism. Make sure that you understand like what the criteria for autism are, depending on where you live, and then make sure that you can get a lot of corroborating stories from other people about that, because there's usually not a good way to test for it based on like MRI scans or anything else, at least that we have yet. And so really people's observations of you and the way that the therapist can observe you in the office where you're being tested are the only things you have to prove that you're autistic.
All right, thank you, Jeff. You seem to have strong opinions on something I said about ABA therapy.
Yeah, I don't. Let me. Well, first, let me say the system in general. I don't find it very competent for dealing with autism and neurodivergence in the first place, I would try to find an actual autistic therapist or professional to help you. If you turn to the system, just manage your expectations in general.
Yeah.
As far as ABA, I am not. Let me just say, I don't want to like rule it out in all cases, but let me just say I would consider very carefully. First of all, the autistic person themselves should be the one motivated or driving the behavior change, not people around him deciding that he should change just to make them feel comfortable. I would look very closely at what the behavior is and why it's being expected to change. Often it's just to get people to conform to social norms that are different from their own norms instead of destigmatizing and trying to normalize neurodivergent norms. It's kind of a form of assimilation or forced assimilation to me. So if you're going to go the ABA route, I would only use it for very extreme behaviors, and I would get the autistic person's buy-in. I would have them be as self-determining as possible in deciding to change the behavior for themselves because they have reasons that fit in with their vision for themselves of why they're going to change it. A lot of times they change the behavior so the parents feel more comfortable and fit in better, or for the people around them to be made less uncomfortable by the behavior. And those to me are not good reasons to like force behavior change on somebody. So the more cooperation and collaboration you can get from the autistic person themselves, the more successful it's likely to be and the more maybe justifiable it is. But in general, I think it's better to identify the strengths of the neurodivergent person, build on those. Don't so much focus on the weaknesses unless they're causing some kind of obvious problem or functionality issue. And try to normalize whatever behaviors it is. It's easier to normalize a behavior usually than to change it, and it's easier to find a setting where that behavior is not as much of a issue or deviation from the norm again than it is to change it. So I would take a completely different approach than ABA when it comes to certain specific behaviors.
All right, thank you. I actually thought about getting the ABA therapy, but I don't know, something I considered. Okay. Oflameo, sounds like you had some opinions on this as well.
Yes, I do. So, like Zeon said, if you want to get the diagnosis, you need a diagnosis to get guess money from OBR or something. But to get the diagnosis, you need to get testimonials from the people your son's near, because psychotherapists don't do field work and they don't make house calls. They don't go to and study the person in the environment. They'll send a social worker to do it for them, and they'll mark the checklist and they'll bring it back to the psychotherapist and say, "Oh yes, that is a checklist," and if it has the right markings, then you get the diagnosis. Also, you can compete the possible with teachers or whoever's around. But yeah, you want to do that if you want to get money from the government. Otherwise, it's probably pointless. It may help with something, I don't know, but it didn't help me all that much.
All right, thank you. I hope that clears some questions up for you, Zion. Elodie, do you have anything you want to add?
Oh, no, I have nothing to add.
All right, thank you. All right, I think we have one more question from the audience, and I got a few more to ask, then we'll wrap this thing up. Mark asks, can you give your thoughts on Autism Speaks organization? Do you agree with neurodivergent people ought to avoid them? I think it's Jeff's turn. I lost track.
It's been a while since I've been like formally involved in the autism community. I do remember some controversy with Autism Speaks where they were advocating or suggesting that autism can be cured. I think they've changed their position recently, but I haven't looked into it. The one I tend to avoid them all because I find the larger, like the more an organization scales up, the more bureaucratic and technocratic it gets, and it loses that humanistic perspective. I had frustrations with ASAN, which is usually the one that people point others toward as an alternative to Autism Speaks. We tried to start a Seattle chapter with them, and they were very unhelpful. They told us they were not approving it. They didn't tell us why. Their communications with us were very avoidant and evasive, and I just found them very, very frustrating to try to work with or get any kind of help from. So your experience may vary. Just kind of, I would focus on individual people. If you find an individual person who happens to be affiliated with Autism Speaks that you get help from or find helpful, use whatever help you can get from them. I don't really have enough knowledge to speak on organizations in general other than my own experience with that one.
All right. Thank you. Flamo, you have anything to add?
Yes, Autism Speaks. ASAN, sit down, shut up. You don't speak for me.
All right. There you go. A very direct answer. Elodie, I'll let you chime in if you want.
But me, I am French, so I have I don't know this organization at all. And in France, I don't think they are very useful neither. I don't have experience at all in the organization.
All right. I never heard of it either, and I'm in the U.S. So, Zeon, have you heard of this organization?
No.
No. All right. Well, hopefully I answered your question, Mark. All right. Just real quick, Ozion says he doesn't live on an isle. He was just joking. Yep. Right over my head. He lived near Oflameo, and his son's an adult and gets help. And thank you for asking questions. All right. Oflameo. What are some overlooked traits and characteristics of the DSM-5 or WHO that doesn't cover, you think, for autism? We'll say autism because there's a lot of neurodivergence and a lot of webs there.
So some misconceptions are that neurodivergent people are always gifted or mentally deficient. There's people of average intelligence like I am. When they tested me last, I was like, the total, I think test was around like 25 or 27. My total IQ was like 105. But yeah, usually they think you're super genius or you're an idiot, and no, there are average people that are neurodivergent.
Okay. Elodie, what do you think on this?
About the misconception?
Yeah, what are some overlooked traits or characteristics of DSM-5 or WHO that doesn't cover?
Don't I have but I have maybe certain idea. I think they should take in consideration the learning style. We really learn differently. Some of us, for the one who have Asperger or giftedness, we can be self-taught. It can be helpful for the diagnosis, I think. I think that's all for me. I think in addition, certain people who have autism, we can also have physical issues because as a professional health told me at the phone one day, the mind and the body are two sides of the same entity. If the nervous system is sensitive or more fragile, or physical body too, we may have many physical health problems. Same as we can have both mental health issues and physical health issues also sometimes.
All right. Thank you for sharing, Elodie, and thank you, Ozion, for sharing that with 5,000 people. I definitely appreciate that. And Zeon, what do you think are some overlooked traits or characteristics for, we'll say, autism, since I think that's what people share here, for the DSM-5 or WHO that doesn't cover?
Overlooked traits? That's a tough one. I mean, part of the confusion is the fact that the ADHD thing is, some people consider it to be rolled into autism now and kind of the same diagnosis. I was told that it was for me, and then other people say, no, that's not how we're doing things. I don't know. It's kind of strange, but one of the things is that autism can, in fact, actually have ADHD-like traits. I mean, it just kind of goes along with the autism territory. I was always very disconnected from reality. I was always daydreaming constantly, so I had the experience of, what is it called, inattentive ADHD, you know, and that's what I thought I had for a long time before I got this diagnosis. So
Okay, yeah, like I said, my son's has ADHD. I think he's going to be an ESFP, maybe ESTP. He definitely has a problem fitting in any with social wise. He fits in well. Doesn't really show traits of autism, so to speak, but
yeah,
I think his behaviors cause him to have some problems fitting in sometimes. I think some kids are scared of him when he kind of goes off the rails, when he has those meltdowns.
and another thing that I would say that's really overlooked maybe by the general public is that ADHD and autism, I think, can have lots of different clusters of effects. So there can be a lot of different subtypes and sort of behavioral differences even within the same condition. And people don't necessarily realize that. And they can look really different and still have underlying causes that are similar or the same. So,
All right.
Yeah, I have a comment. So I used to go berserk when I was a child in the little government re-education camp prisons. I used to go berserk every once in a while because of stress, but now that I'm away from it, I can just train myself to focus, and I have controlled berserk now.
All right. Well, glad you found some help there. Mark commented, having ADHD, autism makes it hard to diagnose either. Okay. So I'm definitely just kind of diving into this. Like 10, 12 years ago, I thought maybe I had Asperger's or something. Then for some reason, I kind of lost the thought and got diagnosed with a whole plethora of other things. I think we hit this question pretty much. What are some misconceptions about neurodivergism? So I think we'll skip that. Unless anybody has a comment.
Say about the features. Talking about what I call ADHD, AUDHD. One thing that shows up in the autism community a lot is the emotional dysregulation as a feature of ADHD or even autism that doesn't necessarily show up in the DSM. Our hardware is not like neurotypicals process and recover from emotions differently, and our hardware is not always developed enough to process really strong emotion, which we're vulnerable to, that comes at us. And so our ability to regulate emotions or to recover from emotions is often not the same as neurotypicals, but that's a feature that I don't see that shows up in the DSM, I don't think. But it shows up in the autism community, I mean the ADHD community itself, or the ADHD community.
yes, yes.
All right. Does anybody want to have any misconceptions that they want to share about neurodivergence?
I think yesterday, by searching on internet, I find a really fancy the neurodevelopmental, intellectual, cognitive or mental illness, trouble or disorder. But for me, it's less strong because it's not accurate at all because the conditions are not disease or illness. They don't have to be cured. They are just differences, gifts, talent, weaknesses. We all have them. It's just a different functioning, another intelligence.
All right. Thank you. Oflameo, do you have anything you want to add? You have a big old shit-eating grin on your face?
Oh yeah, I snuck it in already. So I'm not I was doing something else.
I totally lost track. There's just chaos now.
I think I do have one more
You'll
thing,
be pretty
Jeff.
good DM.
Okay, go ahead, Zeon.
Yeah, I don't know if the statistic is actually true, and I don't know if it's been disproven since I saw it, but they have said that despite level of severity in autism, you have the same likelihood of being unemployed. So like it's like I don't remember, some really high percentage, like 70% of people unemployed, even if they look well adjusted and even if they're high functioning, apparently they just don't get jobs. And so like people are like, oh well, they're high functioning, we don't need to help them as a society. They have to be in a diaper or drooling on themselves before we give them any kind of aid, and that's just not true because a lot of them just don't get jobs anyway. So
I wonder how many homeless people with autism or anything like that are on the streets.
Yeah, someone should do a study, but psychotherapists don't do field work, so we'll never know.
Some of it's probably mistaken for mental illness too, if they're not with people with the expertise to tell the difference, and not only get jobs but keep jobs.
that's right. That's right.
Because we can sometimes get in the door, but we don't always like for me, I know it's always the social etiquette. Every time I've lost a job, it was never about the job itself. It was about some social etiquette that I wasn't fitting into that they eventually got tired of after a while.
Yeah.
What was the question about misconceptions?
And psychology they don't diagram and document social orders, so no one knows what the rules are. We would expect them
No, I
to,
never know the rules.
yeah,
I know how to
Yeah.
do my job, but
yeah, we would expect them to write down the rules, but they don't care. They don't care about what the rules are. It's just as long as they're enforced to whoever's paying them preference.
Yeah.
yeah, as long as the job's more important than the rules, I'll be fine. But a lot of places, the rules seem to be more important than the
That's
job.
right. Yeah,
So
and also,
let me reveal the current. Sometimes a lot of the rules, or just there is no rules. It's might makes right. So a lot of times there
Yeah.
not actually any rules to follow. It's just on a whim. You annoyed me.
Yeah.
Gone. We're gonna make it happen. Might makes right is what happens when there are no rules. That's the secret.
that's right. And also, social relevancy helps protect you from that. And if you don't have that social relevancy, you just get smashed.
Yeah, and when I say rules, I mean the unspoken social rule, not the
Yes,
policy.
the unspoken
Right,
social rules when there is might makes right.
And the culture, yeah.
As far as misconceptions, I quit caring about what other people think or people that are not autistic. I can explain it, but they're from the outside looking in. They're not ever going to fully get it or understand it. Like theory of mind and double empathy. So they can think whatever they want, and if they want to ask questions, I can educate them as best I can. But I don't go out of my way anymore to dispel misconceptions.
Yeah, I
They're
used to
always
try
gonna be
to as well, and it just doesn't work because they can't get
Yeah,
it.
it does.
Yeah, it's a waste of my time to try to educate them in psychology, so I don't bother. I don't even tell them I'm an autist.
I just
Yeah.
try to represent myself the best I can. I try to be a positive contributor to society and a positive representation of a human being, and hope that's good enough. If it's not, they can think whatever they want.
In fact, I have a misconception I want to get rid of. So sometimes psychotherapists like say, "Oh, introduce yourself and give them all your DSM, give them all your DSM stuff." That's wrong. Ignore them. They never do that. Your psychotherapist never does that, and a lot of them is on all kinds of drugs too. They never introduce themselves with their mental illness. They want when they have you as a client, they want the upper hand. They want to be perfect, want to be godlike. They will never introduce themselves the way they tell you to introduce yourself by giving them the list of your mental health diagnoses. That's wrong. Don't do that. In fact, probably act like them. Act like you're an expert. Pretend you know everything. That would work better than what they tell you to do.
Probably.
I just wanted to share a quick story that I have. I used to work in a medical marijuana, growing marijuana, and, well, there was no SJs there, so it was just kind of like the Wild West, really, and it's kind of a whole new frontier in itself. Like, every day, all day, they would blast music, mostly ghetto rap, with one of those loud Bluetooth boom boxes, and for a year and a half, it just drove me nuts, and after a while, I just started, snapping, and I couldn't handle it anymore, and I got fired, basically, because I just got pretty defiant about it and everything about it, and I just got so sick of it. So nobody else seemed to mind all the noise, but I just couldn't stand it. Some people quit from it, actually, but I probably should have quit a long time ago.
I would have probably brought in a boombox with classical music on it just to be ironic and played it very loud.
Yeah, I think that even bothered me. Just the amplification from it. Quick shout out to Schizoid Vision. I thank you for you attending. She has a channel about schizoid personality disorder and MBTI skits, so go ahead and check that out. All right, got a few more questions here. Two more, actually. I forgot who in the hell I left off with, so I'll start with you, Elodie. Oh, questions from the audience. We got those. Okay, the last question I'll say. What would you like others to know about neurodivergence, Elodie?
What's the question?
What would you like others to know about you, your neurodivergence, or just neurodivergence in general?
In general, we are more vulnerable. Yes, I think we really are more vulnerable, more sensitive, really empathetic also. We need a lot of calm, compassion, support. We need also more time to rest and reflect also sometimes. We maybe need more sleep than the typical person. From the inside, we may be long, we may look strong and typical or normal, but on the inside, we are really vulnerable and sensitive to everything. Really, it's as if you comparing to the neurotypical person. It's as if our brain have no filter. As if we receive really twice much more information and sensory than the other people. As if we don't filter the sensory information, so as I said, the light, noise. For myself and maybe the other person, and even for the psychologist, we may feel like vulnerable animals and not human. And sometimes the neurotypical or parent, teacher, or other people, they may think of us that we don't want to do the thing or that we are lazy. But in reality, in our brain, there is an information traffic jam. We are just unable to process information and sometimes unable to react. We don't know what to do. We don't know what to say. And we don't want to hurt people. And so we don't prefer have social interaction. We also have an issue with executive function. We are unable to process or do something. Even if we really want, just we can't. We can have so much energy, so much idea. Even if we really want, just our brain, our body just don't want, and we can do nothing about it. And sometimes just our functioning is limited sometimes when we receive too much information, loud or noise.
All right, thank you, Elodie. Mark has a comment more like it or a question about misconception of having empathy. We'll get to that after we do this little round robin. Zeon, we'll go with you. What would you like others to know about you, your neurodivergence, autism, whatever in general?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to echo some of what Elodie was saying in terms of social interaction and things, but it's like if people acted differently than you expect them to, no matter how heavy-handed the social conception is that you're operating under, you have to kind of give them some grace and not just assume that you understand what's going on in their heads. It's really, really easy for people to come down on autistics and think that they're being bad people or that they're being lazy or even stupid or offensive, intentionally offensive even, right? They'll think that your behavior is like you're distancing yourself from them because you don't like them, or you're not participating because you just want to be lazy at work or whatever. And it's like they need to understand that autistics need their space and their distance, and they need to be able to kind of just be their normal selves without constantly having judgment thrown on them. and people aren't going to understand their responses all the time. They need to ask them what their responses mean. You can't assume what the response means because you're almost always going to be wrong.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Do you have any comments on what would you like others to know about neurodivergence?
That we're people, we're humans, we have skills, we can do shit. Just relax and just love us like you do everybody else. We're usually not aware of the same things that you think we're aware of, so try to be more understanding to the extent that you can, and give us, like Zeon said, give us some grace.
All right, Oflameo, do you have anything you want to touch on?
I already did.
Oh, you did? Okay, my bad. All right, we'll answer this last question from Mark since it just popped up. I find the biggest misconception is that we do not have much empathy. Do you find an error from neurotypical people as well? We'll start with you, Jeff.
Depends on the person. I'm a hyper empath, so some people find me overly empathetic, and some people find me almost sociopathically non-empathetic. So it's going to vary from person to person. I consider myself a burnout empath. With all the trauma and everything, at some point I think I just kind of shut down. But most of my life, I've had an enormous amount of empathy that actually overwhelmed me at times, and impacted my ability to function. So yes, we do have empathy. I don't know why people think we don't. Sometimes people think I stare, or I look cold or detached, and I'm really just listening. Like, but they read it as
Yeah.
not empathetic or engaged. So, like I said, I don't worry about too much anymore about their impressions. The ones that get it, or the ones that want to get it will get it.
All right, Oflameo, do you have anything you'd like to add to this?
So yes, but I'll probably spur up and down that I don't. That's to protect that image.
Okay. Elodie, you're going to say something?
But for me, it's a reverse. From when I was diagnosed giftedness and Asperger, they also in same time told me I was very very empathetic. Sometimes for me we are really for me the neurodivergence we are really the reverse. We have really much more empathy than the neurotypical. It's just sometimes we don't know how to react. We don't know what to do. We are really much very we are really empathetic. We may be hyper empathetic. It's just depending on the situation. We just don't know how to react, how to do, what to say, because we don't want to be rude to people.
All right. Thank you. Zeon, you want to add anything about this with empathy?
Yeah, well, and since I have the whole ENTJ personality designation, it's like we're notorious for being sort of intellectually empathic, but not necessarily emotionally. And we will be very caring and attached to people at a very deep level, but it may not always come out on the surface, and people kind of view us as cold, you know. And with autism, it's even worse because there's a low affect. You don't seem to emote a lot and whatever. And then people are like, you don't care about anything. I've gotten that a lot. You don't care about anything. It's like, oh, yes, I do. Or I wouldn't be doing X, Y, and Z, right? Judge me by my actions, not by what you think I'm doing.
All right. Thank you. I think everybody touched on that. Just want to give some more plugs. Got a lot to say here. Ozian Talks, thank you for joining. Mark Reed, thank you for joining. It looks like you guys have your own YouTube channels. I'll definitely check those out later. Cloud TG, there is no spoon. Not sure what you're talking about. Schizoid, Angry, Peach. Anybody else who I'm missing? Thank you for joining. Elodie, Oflameo, Jeff, Zeon, thank you for being guests.
Yep.
Tomorrow we're doing a video with Gen X Jeff with me and Zeon on my other channel, Astrotype. It'll be out sometime next week. We're going to look at his birth chart, and we've been looking into autism and personality types, so we'll kind of see if ENTP shows up there. All you guys' relevant links will be down in the description. If I missed anything, just shoot me a text or whatever, or DM. Thank you for joining. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Thank you.